Today is all about telling you a story. When I joined the company 10 years back, we were 500 crores. Today, with my father's vision, we're a 5,000 crore company in Pune. We have over 10,000 employees. 60% of our business comes from outside India. And over 600 scientists work in our facility in Hinjewadi. So truly a 10x story just in 10 years, but when he founded in 1983, obviously a much larger growth story. So I'd like to begin my story of this crazy, brave visionary, my father Satish Mehta. When he graduated, after he graduated from IIM Ahmedabad, he refused to join his father's retail store, and the risk taker that he is, decided to start his own manufacturing unit in pharmaceuticals. That was way back in 1983. Took the slightly safer method of contract manufacturing for a lot of multinationals like Pfizer, Glaxo, the big names, to make medicines, their medicines for the Indian market. That was a really smart beginning, because what that gave the company is the gene of a multinational. Because whether it's a Pfizer or a Glaxo or a Roche, there would be these continuous audits on a quarterly basis. Their team from abroad would come and micro sort of analyze every small little system and process. And I think that's what really gave us our foundation and gene of a multinational. Sometime around 1995 is when he decided that, I need to get out of this low margin business and start making my own products. And everyone advised him against it, because by 1995, for anyone who follows pharmaceuticals, there were some giant industries or Indian multinationals, like you call them, as well as a lot of foreign multinationals had set up their Indian arms. So everyone advised him not to go or foray into this, for the simple reason that it was extremely crowded, extremely fragmented, the typical management case study of low barriers to entry and why do you want to get into this. But again, the risk taker, contrarian that he is, he decided to set out on his own. When we started manufacturing medicines for the Indian market under the Emcure name, our own branded generics, we were ranked 128th by IMS, which tracks pharma industry. Today, as we speak, we're top 10 in India, and that's truly, truly been an incredible growth path. Today, when you look at any therapeutic area, so we're strongest in women's health. Our biggest brand is anemia, which is a 350 crore brand for us, Oro4 XT. But if you look at any therapeutic area, whether you talk about, gynec, hypertension, diabetes, oncology, nephrology, neurology, you name it, derma, we're there in every therapeutic area. And in a lot of these therapeutic areas, we beat the old timers to get dominant positions in those areas. So once again, he proved that he can make a mark there. Then in 2001, he did the craziest thing of his lifetime. This is when he got private equity investment, got crazy amount of loans, and decided that he wants to set up these US FDA facilities, and exactly what he did in India, which is make for multinationals, but for the Indian market. He wanted to now make for multinationals, but for the US market. So become a contract manufacturer for the multinationals, but sell in the US. Now that is a crazy game, because let me explain it to you. The day you take your bank loan, and the day it takes you anywhere from 2 to 3 years just to set up a US FDA facility, because that's the kind of infrastructure and systems you need. After you get that, it takes about a year to get the US FDA approval. So that's 4 years of just a CFO's nightmare, like I call it, because it's operating expenses, you got to keep the systems running, it's huge capex, huge debt, huge interest cost, just a P&L nightmare. You do that for 4 years, and it's not like the money comes in after 4 years, because then after 4 years, when you've got the US FDA approval, you go and pitch to multinationals. You go abroad, and then you just hope and pray that a Pfizer will give a gentleman like Satish Mehta and a private company that no one has ever heard of, and a city like Pune that again no one's ever heard of, their business, right? But he managed to do that. But hold on for a minute. Once you get the business, there's tech transfer. So that takes 2 years. So to put things into perspective, from the time you get that bank loan till that first rupee hits your top line, it's a 6-year waiting period. And that is what I call an entrepreneur. If you really want to understand the definition of an entrepreneur, there are a lot of buzzwords, but I think this story just says it all. He took that risk, he built world-class facilities. We have 11 facilities at this point. We have beautiful facilities in Jammu, Sikkim, Bangalore, Kurkum, Hinjewadi right here in the US, and he's done a remarkable job. So that was in 2001. But then again, here's a man who doesn't believe in resting or taking it easy, or maybe taking an early retirement and doing some philanthropy. No, he just keeps going. So in 2011, again, he's like, I need to do something, and that's when he decided to make his very first acquisition. So Emcure's always sort of believed in the build versus buy mentality, or whatever you want to call it. And 2011 is when he realized that if he wants to sell in the US market his own products like he did in India, he would need to partner with somebody, just because to build the relationships with the 4 top distributors is not something that happens quickly. And then get the paperwork, get it, get into their systems. It takes a while. And that's when in 2011, he bought a virtual company. The reason I say virtual is that no manufacturing, no R&D, just a team of people who did marketing and had relationships with the distributors. So in 2011, he bought that company when they had a turnover of 11 million US dollars. And today, this year, we're going to exit at 300 million US dollars. So that's what he did with that company. What he did is he bought their marketing bandwidth, and then he had the R&D in Pune, he had the manufacturing in Pune, so it's a beautiful case study of vertical integration. Once that was a success, then again, the man never rests. He decided to do that in London, he decided to do that in Canada, and Aditya just mentioned, the string of pearls philosophy, or an acquisition after acquisition that makes sense, continued. Life is never easy for an entrepreneur, and he's had a set of challenges, so it's not that everything just worked out great. My memories of growing up were that there would be phone calls, and he would tell my mother, "Bolo ke ghar pe nahi hai aap, kal subah 10 baje phone kare," because at 9 o'clock that check would hit the banks, and at 10 o'clock he'd be able to pay the creditor. So my father went bankrupt almost twice in this journey of taking the company to 5,000 crores. And I remember those days when we were almost bankrupt and people advised him to shut down the business were not easy days for him. But he never showed it. So maybe the little bit of iota of positivity is a genetic disorder that comes from him, because he is an eternal optimist. Just about 3 years back, he had the biggest blow of his career. He's 68, works harder than anyone I know. I mean, he'll come from the US at 2 in the morning, wake up at 5 for his yoga, he's at work at 7. Just the most high integrity, hardworking person, obsessed with the company Emcure. But 3 years back, he had the most terrible thing happened to him, because his very first acquisition, he bought it from 2 brothers, and he's always believed in having multiple entrepreneurs. So we joke in the family that everyone's a CEO and we're not, the family is the only one who's not a CEO, because he's got some really good professionals by making them CEOs and by giving them equity in the company. So when the company goes public, they've got skin in the game. So that's exactly what he did in the US, but this time it didn't work. The 2 gentlemen backstabbed him. They had got into all sorts of messy business in the US. We fired them the very next day. But for 3 years, he had to go through a very tough time with the legal department in the US. And I don't know how he dealt with it, but he always dealt with it with a smile on his face. He's had issues running into, regulatory issues with the factories, where the factories got shut down by the US authorities for 2-3 years. But we've been asked to talk about key takeaways. And I think one of the biggest takeaways about him is, yes, he was a risk taker, is a risk taker. Yes, he's an eternal optimist. But the most important thing is that it's always planned. There's always a checklist. And he always leads by example. He works harder than anyone I know, and he knows the pulse. So there are times that we'll be sitting in a meeting, and the way he's divided the business is, I look after the India business, which is 40% of the sales. So the CFO title is, I was telling Aditya, redundant, because a year and a half back I got to control the top line, which is more exciting. My brother controls Europe and my husband controls US. So they're very clear demarcations, which I'm very happy because I never see my husband and brother, which I think is the best kind of succession planning because we all have our own things to do. Otherwise, a type A personalities, we'd end up killing each other. So anyway, coming back to Satish Mehta, the point I'm making is when he sits in review meetings with us, so for example, me, I'm just looking at that India business. He's looking at emerging markets, Europe, US, India, R&D, manufacturing. He's looking at everything. Everything's in his head. So God forbid, out of my 300 brands, if he's going to ask me one brand, what was the sales in December and the growth percent in volume and value terms? And if I make the mistake of opening my laptop, I'm finished. Right? Because why is it not in your head? Are you not looking at it every day? Doesn't it give you sleepless nights? Aren't you thinking about it? Why do you need to open a laptop to look at your core business and your core numbers? And then the tanas start, right? Guys are lucky, second generation, got it already made, you don't have to work hard, blah, 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 blah. So, to avoid all of that, we make sure that when we walk into meetings with him, we're really prepared, we've memorized everything, have those little post-it cards while brushing our teeth that, oh, this is what it is. So he keeps us on our toes, but it's beautiful because we're learning every single day, and it's an honor and a privilege to learn from the best. And don't get me wrong, we have our fights. I'm a very strong-headed person. So are my siblings, my husband. So we get into our powwows, but we always walk out with a decision, and then everyone sticks with it. And sometimes the best decisions come out of disagreement. So definitely a fun and very exciting journey. Personally for me, when I joined the company 10 years back, it wasn't easy because there's no credibility for a second generation. People don't take you seriously. I think in my case, two things helped me when I joined. Number one, having a CA MBA degree and having worked for 6 years in a company other than my father's gives you a credibility, certain amount of credibility when you join. Secondly, I was very persistent if I wanted to change something, because I was all about, since I'd worked in the US, I was all about, like we just discussed, putting systems in place, having a leadership bandwidth at level 2, level 3, level 4. I was very passionate about that. And so every time I'd suggest Salesforce automation or things like that, and there'd be pushback, I think my one quality that helped me is I'd be persistent and keep on at it till I think they were sick of me and told me to do it just because they were sick of me. So that was in the initial 2-3 years when the credibility wasn't built. After that, when my own personal confidence was built, I don't want to, when we get passionate, we overrun our time. I've got 2 more minutes? 2 more minutes. So bottom line is that when after a couple of years my credibility was built, or rather I don't think the credibility ever gets built, but your confidence gets built and you become more thick-skinned as you get more white hair, I guess. So I think after a few years, and even if you see me now, I just bulldoze my way. I don't really wait for people to give me permission. I do what I feel is right, and not everything I do ends up correct. I've had my share of failures, but I want to learn from my failures by trying my own things. And I think that's the beauty that, we try a lot of different things. We fail in some, we learn in others, but it's been an exciting journey. I'm personally very passionate about having more women in our company. So I see a decent percentage here, but we started programs like Prerna, where we really work hard with speaker sessions, mentoring, networking to get more women in the company. I think women need to get rid of guilt. It's like damn if you do, damn if you don't. If you're working, you're guilty you missed a PTA meeting. If you're a housewife, you're guilty you wasted your degrees. So just get rid of the damn guilt, you'll be 10x more productive. So I tell my women that all the time, get rid of the guilt, become a little selfish, learn to promote yourself. So I have my own Instagram page, I'm very open to media, I'm out there speaking, talking. I think there's nothing wrong in speaking up and getting yourself out there. So I think this is what I tell our women at Emcure, and we have a lot of fun together. I think women in positions of power like me need to do that extra bit to have a higher percent of women in the workforce. So these are my few key takeaways. I'm sorry I will not be able to wait for the Q&A session, but I did want to come by and share our story with you. I will share my email ID with Aditya, so any of you who'd like to visit our facility in Hinjewadi or have very specific questions on any of these phases that I spoke about, please feel free to email me and I will get back to your questions. Thank you for your time.